I just want to bring you some sad breaking news now, and that is that the actress Diane Keaton has died at the age of 79.
The news broke quietly, almost too quietly for a name that had once defined an entire generation of cinema. Actress Diane Keaton has died at the age of 79. The anchor's voice trembled slightly as the words echoed through living rooms and studios across America. Within minutes, social media turned solemn. Headlines described her as the symbol of style, intelligence, and independence. But behind those tributes, behind the grainy montage of hats, laughter, and film scenes, something far more unsettling began to surface. Because when the official documents were reviewed, the autopsy revealed details that didn't match the serene story the public had been told. There were unusual markings, faint discolorations on the neck and skin, signs that medical examiners described as anomalous. And almost immediately, the questions began. Friends whispered that in her final weeks, Diane had become almost unrecognizable. Frail, ghost-like, and confined mostly to her upstairs study, she rarely left the house. Some nights, the lights in her window stayed on until dawn, as if she was writing her final words to the world. Hollywood mourned her as the free-spirited woman who had danced through decades with unmatched grace. But beneath the condolences, one haunting question lingered. Had the beloved star of Annie Hall simply grown old, or had she been quietly fighting something much darker? Diane Keaton was more than an actress. She was an institution, an idea, a reflection of everything America admired about individuality. And yet, in the end, her story might not have been as peaceful as it seemed. Diane Hall, later known as Diane Keaton, was born on January 5, 1946, in Los Angeles. A restless dreamer, she dropped out of college and moved to New York, chasing Broadway lights with the audacity of someone who believed she could bend destiny. Her beginnings were humble: auditions, small parts, crowded apartments, but even then, people noticed her presence. There was something magnetic about her awkwardness, a sincerity that drew audiences in before she ever spoke a word. When Annie Hall arrived in 1977, Diane didn't just play a character, she became a cultural archetype. The slouchy trousers, the nervous laughter, the androgynous charm, it all became shorthand for a new kind of woman, intelligent, funny, and unapologetically real. Her performance earned her an Oscar, but more than that, it gave women permission to be imperfect. For decades, she glided through cinema with quiet rebellion. The Godfather, Reds, Father of the Bride, Something's Gotta Give. Each role felt like a conversation between the woman she was and the woman society expected her to be. Off-screen, she was a paradox, private yet outspoken, eccentric yet deeply disciplined. Her iconic wide-brimmed hats became her signature. To the world, they were fashion. To Diane, they were protection, symbols of privacy in an industry that demanded exposure. When People magazine confirmed her passing in October 2025, Hollywood seemed to pause. The Los Angeles Fire Department reported that she had been transported to the hospital after an early morning emergency call, but she could not be revived. The cause of death was withheld. That silence, uncharacteristic even for someone so private, ignited curiosity. Her life had always been an open secret, but her death felt deliberately closed. Those who had known Diane longest said the signs had been there for years. Her once brisk walk slowed. Her arms, once strong from decades on set, trembled slightly when she lifted a cup of tea. And yet, she smiled through it all, hiding the exhaustion beneath oversized hats and long gloves. Her struggle began early. At 21, a photographer noticed a dark spot on her left cheek during a promotional shoot. A few weeks later, doctors at UCLA delivered the news: basal cell carcinoma, a form of skin cancer. The surgery lasted hours. When she awoke, her cheek was swollen, raw, and numb. The girl who once basked in sunlight would never look at daylight the same way again. "I was never afraid of sunlight until that day," she later said. "Since then, sunlight makes me shiver." From that moment, her identity intertwined with her illness. She wore hats not just for fashion, but for survival. During the filming of Annie Hall, crew members remembered her quietly stepping out of bright light, as if the sun itself had turned against her. The fear never left. By the late 1990s, she faced another scare, a small tumor near her neck. She dismissed it publicly, saying only, "My skin's a bit delicate." But friends saw the truth. She lived with a shadow that followed her into every role, every close-up. Her father had suffered the same disease. She remembered him returning home with bandages across his face, telling her, "Never forget your hat." Years later, she would echo those words to herself in the mirror. For half a century, she battled her body in silence. Her films showed light. Her life wrestled with fear. By 2025, that fear had become a grim routine. Reports from Cedars-Sinai revealed that Diane visited frequently for dermatological tests. In January, scans detected abnormal tissue on her neck and shoulder. Doctors urged a biopsy, but it was postponed. Her condition was deteriorating too fast. Her longtime housekeeper recalled sleepless nights. She'd wake up and just stare at herself in the mirror for hours, applying cream again and again. Some nights she'd whisper, "Something's not right." It wasn't cancer that ended her life, at least, not directly. But experts believe decades of treatment and emotional strain had worn her down. Her immune system, once resilient, was failing. Director Nancy Meyers later revealed that in her final year, Diane refused to appear in daylight. Even gentle morning light made her wince. She said it felt like needles on her skin, Nancy recalled. It was as though her oldest fear had reclaimed her. Sunlight, time, and the mirror had all turned into enemies. Her autopsy would later describe her body as visibly fatigued, showing prolonged systemic weakness. Hollywood called it natural causes. Those who knew her knew better. It was the slow unraveling of a body that had fought too long. Yet the story of Diane Keaton's fragility began long before her final diagnosis. In a 2016 interview, she admitted something that stunned fans. She had battled bulimia for years during her early career. "I always thought I had to look perfect," she confessed. "The price of perfection was madness." Her co-workers remembered her subsisting on black coffee and half an apple, her weight fluctuating weekly. On the set of Looking for Mr. Goodbar, she fainted mid-scene. The on-set doctor diagnosed exhaustion and malnutrition, but Diane refused hospitalization. 2 days later, she returned to set, smiling. It wasn't vanity, it was control. She wasn't addicted to food or fame, but to the discipline of survival. Friends recalled her weighing herself 3 times a day, terrified of seeing the number rise. Although she later overcame the disorder, embracing self-acceptance publicly, the damage was lasting. Specialists have long noted that chronic eating disorders can permanently weaken the heart, digestive tract, and immune system. When forensic analysts reviewed Diane's autopsy, they found signs of metabolic depletion, a clinical echo of her younger struggles. The same control that built her career had, in the end, quietly dismantled her body. The irony was cruel. The woman who once embodied freedom had spent a lifetime trapped inside a fragile shell. As Diane entered her 50s, Hollywood's obsession with youth became impossible to ignore. Paparazzi captured her radiant smile and unlined skin, calling her ageless. But whispers began. Had Diane discovered the secret everyone in Hollywood wanted? A 2005 article titled "The Curious Change in Diane Keaton's Face" compared her jawline and neck to earlier years. Experts noticed subtle tightening, no scars, no bruising, just an almost too perfect smoothness. A private source claimed she had undergone micro-lifts under Dr. Eleanor Wu, a surgeon known for invisible scar techniques. None of this was ever confirmed, but when Diane re-emerged months later at the Golden Globes, her eyes seemed softer, her smile slower. When asked about surgery, she simply smiled. "I neither deny nor confirm. Everyone wants to look a little better." Her answer, half truth and half deflection, became her shield. She understood the double standard better than anyone. Aging gracefully was celebrated, but aging honestly was not. Her autopsy, however, found evidence of small internal scar tissue along her jaw and neck, likely from minor cosmetic work. It wasn't scandalous, but it deepened the narrative. Diane Keaton had fought to control even the passage of time. To outsiders, her appearance was effortless. In truth, it was armor, layered, polished, and heavy. By the final months of 2025, Diane's home in Sullivan Canyon had turned into both sanctuary and shadow. The tall trees surrounding her property muffled the noise of Los Angeles, leaving behind only the faint hum of wind and the occasional rustle of leaves against glass. Her study, the one she called her upstairs world, became her last stage. Inside, framed photographs of her children and old co-stars lined the shelves, and the smell of cedar drifted through the air from an old candle that had long since lost its flame. Visitors recalled that silence hung thick inside those walls. Her longtime friend, songwriter Carol Byers-Sager, described the last visit vividly. "When I stepped inside," she said, "it was like time had slowed down." Diane stood at the door wearing a long robe and her silver hair loose. "She was so light I thought I might break her if I hugged too hard." They sat together in the study where Diane had written for years. Her voice, once sharp and quick, now came out in faint whispers that trailed off between sentences. "The kids are doing fine," she said softly, referring to her children, Dexter and Duke. "They have their own lives now. I just feel slower." She had always been fiercely independent, raising both children as a single mother. But now that independence had transformed into quiet isolation. Her children begged to move in, to stay by her side, but Diane declined gently every time. "I've lived by my choices," she told them. "Let me keep that one." Her housekeeper, Maria Lopez, said the same routine played out each morning. Diane would descend the stairs slowly, make a single cup of coffee, and disappear into her study for hours. She wrote in short bursts, then stared out the window, often at the same sycamore tree she'd photographed years before. "Sometimes," Maria said, "I'd pass by her door and hear jazz music playing very low, Ella Fitzgerald or Billie Holiday, and Diane humming along." In late September, her neighbor Frank Morgan noticed something unusual. "She used to walk her dog, Emmy, every morning," he said. "Then one day, she stopped. Weeks passed, and that gate never opened again, but late at night, her light would still be on. I'd see her silhouette, thin, unmoving, facing the window." When Maria went upstairs one morning, she found a page on Diane's desk, written in hurried penmanship. "No one knows how tired I feel inside, but I must keep writing because that's how I know I'm still here." The words felt final, like the closing line of a book she'd been writing her whole life. By early October, her health had declined drastically. She spoke less, ate almost nothing, and spent more time asleep than awake. Yet even in frailty, there was order. Her lipstick always matched her robe, her notebooks neatly stacked beside the bed. She said as long as she could still look in the mirror, Carol later recalled. She wasn't gone yet. The final photograph ever taken of her, captured by her assistant days before she passed, shows Diane sitting beside her window. Light falls across half her face, and her glasses have slipped down her nose. Her notebook rests on her lap, pen still in hand. The familiar smile, the one that lit up screens for half a century, is gone. In its place is calm acceptance. Diane Keaton was no longer acting. She was simply waiting, gracefully, privately, and entirely on her own terms. Then came the decision that sent shockwaves through her circle of friends. In February 2025, while the industry still speculated about her absence, Diane quietly listed her beloved Sullivan Canyon mansion, the same one she'd poured her soul into for over a decade, on the market. The news broke through Mansion Global with disbelief. Diane Keaton selling her dream home? It felt unthinkable. The house wasn't just property. It was her autobiography in wood and stone. She had designed it from scratch, restoring century-old beams, collecting artifacts from flea markets, and turning ordinary corners into cinematic spaces. The walls bore hundreds of framed photos, each one a snapshot of her memory. Friends, film sets, sunlight on old bricks. Architectural Digest had once described it as an architectural poem, every room a stanza of light and memory. To Diane, it was her Pinterest house, named after her book, The House That Pinterest Built, a creative manifesto for living artfully. So, when her agent at Compass Realty received the call, even he hesitated to ask why. During the listing photo shoot, Diane appeared herself, dressed simply in a gray turtleneck, wide-brimmed hat, and almost no makeup. Her skin was pale, her posture frail, but her eyes were steady. When a photographer asked casually what made her sell, she answered softly, "I just want everything settled before summer." To outsiders, it sounded like practicality. To those who knew her, it was something deeper, finality disguised as order. Within days, neighbors noticed subtle changes. The garden lights stayed off. Moving vans came and went. Late at night, faint glows flickered from room to room as if she were walking through the house one last time, saying goodbye to each wall. "It looked," said Frank Morgan, "like she was letting go of pieces of herself." The house sold quickly, reportedly for around $29 million. Records later confirmed that Diane donated a significant portion of the proceeds to the Skin Cancer Foundation and a children's literacy fund. For fans, that act felt quintessentially her, practical, graceful, and giving even in retreat. But some friends saw it differently. "She was clearing space," said director Nancy Myers. "It was her way of closing chapters." Diane always liked control. Selling that house meant she could write her own ending. The mansion's new owner described finding something unexpected after moving in. A small envelope tucked behind a bookshelf, labeled simply "Light." Inside were two photographs, one of a sunrise over Los Angeles and one of Diane herself, smiling, wearing the same hat she wore in Annie Hall. Whether she placed it there deliberately or not, no one can say. But to those who loved her, it felt like one last message: remember me in light. In December 2024, when the world least expected it, Diane released what would become her final creative work, a haunting Christmas song titled First Christmas. It arrived quietly on streaming platforms, with no grand promotion or fanfare. The song began with a single piano note, soft as snowfall, and then her voice, aged, raspy, but filled with an intimacy that felt almost intrusive to hear. "This is my first Christmas alone," she sang, "but the lights still shine for me." Fans were stunned. It wasn't the voice of Annie Hall or Kay Adams. It was the voice of a woman speaking directly from the edge of her own story. Producer Greg Kirsten later revealed that Diane had brought a worn leather notebook into the studio each morning. She'd arrive early around 8 a.m., he said. She'd hum the melody under her breath, then sit down and write. Some days, she'd record one verse and just stare at the microphone after. Once, she whispered, "I hope my daughter hears this next Christmas." Critics called the song a goodbye disguised as comfort. Rolling Stone described it as an audio postcard from someone fading gently into memory. Just weeks after the song's release, she vanished completely from the public eye. No appearances, no interviews, no statements. In hindsight, fans realized the song had been a prelude to farewell. But that wasn't her only final act. Months before, Diane had filmed her last movie, Constance, a psychological thriller directed by Mark Pellington. The film followed an aging mother who escapes her controlling children for one day of freedom, only to find herself trapped in a surreal struggle between illusion and reality. Pellington said, "Diane understood the story before I even finished explaining it. She told me, 'It's not about fear of death. It's about wanting one more chance to feel alive.'" During filming, she refused body doubles even in physically demanding scenes. She ran barefoot through cold rain. Assistant director Rachel Young recalled, "We tried to stop her, but she said, 'If I don't shiver for real, the audience won't believe me.'" The production wrapped in October 2024. In the final scene, Constance smiles softly into the morning light. After the take, Diane walked away without speaking. Pellington followed and asked if she was all right. She smiled faintly and said, "I think I've just finished the last role of my life." When Constance premiered posthumously in late 2025, the audience stood for nearly 10 minutes. Many said it didn't feel like a performance. It felt like watching Diane Keaton say goodbye to herself. Her final creative works, First Christmas and Constance, were not coincidences. They were confessions. One in song, one in film. Both closing the loop on a life that had always balanced artistry with vulnerability. When the world learned of Diane Keaton's death, a rare stillness swept through Hollywood. No gossip, no cynicism, just hush. The city that had once mirrored her energy seemed to dim. The hills felt quieter, the boulevard lights a little less bright. Her peers were the first to speak. Goldie Hawn, her lifelong friend, wrote on Instagram, "Diane, we weren't ready to lose you. You left us a trail of stardust full of light and laughter. We were supposed to grow old together and still tell stories over wine." Steve Martin, her father of the bride co-star, shared a single black-and-white photo of Diane in her trademark hat with one word beneath: loved. Bette Midler added, "She was funny, brilliant, genuine. What you saw was who she was." Tributes poured in from every generation of actors and filmmakers. Emma Stone called her the original muse of authenticity. Greta Gerwig said, "She made imperfection cinematic." Directors, costume designers, even extras she'd once worked beside, told stories of her warmth, her precision, her habit of remembering everyone's name. Online, the hashtag #LadyDay trended worldwide. Fans posted stills from Annie Hall, Reds, and Something's Gotta Give with captions like, "She taught me to be myself. She made growing older look fearless. And thank you for letting awkward be beautiful." In New York, a spontaneous vigil appeared outside the Lincoln Center, hundreds of candles forming the shape of her iconic wide-brimmed hat. In Paris, the Cinémathèque Française screened Annie Hall to a sold-out crowd that stood in silence before the credits rolled. In Tokyo, a projection of her smiling face illuminated Shibuya Crossing for one night, the crowd below whispering her name as if afraid to disturb her peace. Back in Los Angeles, her favorite cafe placed a small sign on the corner table, "Reserved for Diane." A single cup of black coffee sat untouched beside it. But amid the tributes, journalists revisited the lingering mysteries, the medical anomalies in her autopsy, the quiet sale of her house, and the handwritten notebooks left behind. One line captured hearts around the world. "The world looks softer when you know you're leaving it." Friends said that summed her perfectly. Calm acceptance without self-pity, curiosity even in farewell. Film historians began to reinterpret her career, not as a collection of roles but as a single evolving narrative, a lifelong conversation with time, identity, and solitude. She wasn't chasing perfection. She was questioning what it meant to be human in front of a camera. In retrospectives that followed, critics noted how her early awkwardness became charm, her humor became defiance, and her fragility became strength. "She made vulnerability fashionable," wrote The Guardian. In an age of imitation, Diane Keaton proved sincerity could still steal the scene. Months later, at the Academy Museum, a special exhibition opened titled "Hats Off to Diane Keaton." Her wide-brimmed hats hung like constellations above letters she had written to friends and directors. Visitors moved quietly beneath them, reading her words in glass cases, each sentence playful yet profound. Even years after her passing, her presence lingers. Fans claim to see her spirit in small, everyday things: a tilted hat in a thrift store window, a woman laughing too loudly in a cafe, sunlight falling through white curtains. She lives on in every gesture of unfiltered joy. Diane Keaton didn't chase immortality. She earned it gently, through kindness, humor, and the courage to live truthfully. Her story ended the way she lived, on her own terms, surrounded by silence, wrapped in grace. Perhaps she never feared death at all. Perhaps she only feared being misunderstood. And through her words, her films, and that endless dance between light and shadow, she ensured the world would always understand. Diane Keaton's story reminds us that even legends carry silent battles behind their smiles. If her life touched you, take a moment to share your thoughts below. Do you believe her final choices were quiet courage or hidden heartbreak? Subscribe now to uncover more untold Hollywood stories, forgotten truths, and mysteries that deserve the light. Because every star leaves behind a shadow worth remembering.